best gift you could give me, Mother, would be if you disappeared from my life.
All for $40,000. The daughter I once loved as my own wishes I were gone forever.
The birthday cake hit the floor, candles sputtering out. The best gift you could give me, Mother, would be if you disappeared from my life. All for $40,000. The daughter I once loved as my own wishes I were gone forever. But will justice and truth ever come to light? My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 67 years old, a retired nurse with dark skin, living alone in Charleston, South Carolina. My whole life has been about taking care of others, working double shifts, tending to the sick, believing that kindness somehow would always be repaid with gratitude. I was widowed young and raised my son alone, then opened my arms to his wife as if she were my own daughter. But in the end, all my kindness bought me was a fall, a hard, shattering fall, like that birthday cake lying ruined on the floor. No one spoke after Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, said those words. She stood before me, her eyes glinting with the cold light of the extinguished candles, her lips curved into a faint, careless smile. To her, those words weighed nothing, but to me, the woman who had loved, trusted, and sacrificed for her, they fell like stones on my chest. I looked down at the floor. The chocolate cake covered in strawberries from her favorite bakery, no less, was smashed flat, frosting mixed with melted wax. It looked like some grotesque painting of a celebration gone wrong. In my head, a single thought echoed. The cake shattered, just like my faith in her. I remembered every dollar I'd spent for her, the $40,000 from my retirement savings, to help her and my son pay off their first house. The birthday gifts I'd chosen so carefully just to make her feel loved. But maybe it was those very gifts that made her believe I existed only to give, to provide endlessly, like a talking wallet, instead of a human being. I could still hear laughter from the living room, her friends giggling over wine, the faint hum of jazz playing in the background. I stood motionless in the cold, quiet dining room while Vanessa's high heels clicked across the floor, stepping right through the broken mess of the cake as if it weren't there. "Don't misunderstand me," she said without looking up. "I just think your life would be easier if you stopped interfering with ours." I swallowed hard. "Interfering? She cut me off, her tone perfectly calm. "I'm grateful for everything you've done, truly, but maybe the best gift you could give me is if you disappeared from my life." The room seemed to lose all its air. I stared at her, the woman I had once called daughter, the one who cried in my arms after giving birth to my first grandchild. But now in her eyes, I saw no warmth, only the cold certainty of someone who had decided I no longer belonged in her world. I gave a weak laugh, the kind that hurts more than it sounds. "So that's the gift you want from me? My disappearance?" Vanessa said nothing. She turned away, raising her glass of wine to her lips, while I bent down to pick up the pieces of cake. The frosting stuck to my fingers, cold, slippery, like my heart cracking open. Her heels tapped against the hardwood floor, slow and rhythmic, like a clock counting down to the moment I realized this relationship was already dead. When I stepped outside, the wind from the Charleston River slapped against my face, sharp and cold, as if trying to erase the last traces of warmth from my skin. I stood there, staring at the city lights shimmering on the water, and thought about what she'd said. I've lived long enough to know that some words once spoken can never be taken back. That night, I drove home to my small apartment downtown, my hands trembling with anger, with heartbreak, and with a hollow kind of silence. I had believed I had a family. I had believed that love, if it was true, could never abandon you. But I was wrong. And there, under the dim golden lights of Charleston's old streets, I made myself a promise. If they wanted me gone, I would disappear, but not in the way they expected. Because sometimes it's in the darkness of betrayal that justice finally finds its way home. I sat alone in my small apartment, the lamplight casting a dim glow over the worn wooden table. The familiar scent of black tea drifted through the room, soft yet bitter. Outside my window, Charleston remained peaceful, as if the quiet city had never witnessed the storm that had just swept through my life. Vanessa's words kept replaying in my head, sharp and unrelenting, like a wound that refused to close. The best gift you could give me is if you disappeared from my life. I closed my eyes, trying to chase the image away, but the harder I tried to forget, the clearer my memories became. My entire life I had lived for the happiness of others. When my husband died in an accident, Michael, our only son, was just 14. I still remember standing in that sterile hospital hallway, my hands trembling as I signed the papers to claim his body. I had only one thought in my mind: you cannot fall apart. From that day on, I worked twice as hard, then 3 times as hard, just to give my son a future. 40 years as a nurse, that was my life. I spent my youth under the white glow of hospital lights, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of heart monitors. I missed parties, skipped dinners, gave up sleep, all so that one day when Michael graduated, I could stand in the crowd and feel proud. I believed at his happiness would be the only reward I'd ever need. When Michael married Vanessa, I cried, not out of sadness, but because I thought my life's purpose had finally been fulfilled. Vanessa was beautiful, confident, a little proud, but I believed she would make my son happy. Their wedding was held at a riverside hotel, white roses lining the aisle, and I sold the house where I had lived my entire life with my husband just to pay for it all. When I signed the deed, I remember telling the real estate agent with a smile, I only want one thing for my son, not to worry about a thing on his wedding day. I thought that was love, but now I see it was blindness. I was also the one who helped them buy their first home, a pretty little house in a quiet neighborhood. I even planted daisies by the porch myself. I withdrew $40,000 from my retirement savings, money I had scrimped and saved for over 30 years, to help them make the down payment. Vanessa hugged me, tears shining in her eyes, and said, "I'll never forget your kindness, Mom." Now that sentence feels like a promise carried away by the wind. After the wedding, I kept helping them, bringing food, babysitting, buying gifts, fixing things around the house. I thought I was a pillar in their lives, but in truth, I was only a temporary support beam for a home that no longer needed me. Once Michael teased me as he watched me repair the fence in their yard. "Mom, you worry too much. Our house is solid." I laughed along with him, but inside, something heavy settled in my chest, because I knew the truth. I was the first brick that built their home, and the one they eventually pushed out the door. Now, in this small apartment, I looked around 4 blank walls, a few faded photographs, a worn leather chair, the remnants of a life spent in sacrifice, none of which held warmth anymore. I picked up a picture from the shelf, the one from Michael and Vanessa's wedding. They stood together, smiling brightly. I was behind them, holding a bouquet, smiling faintly, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who no longer realizes she's just a background figure in her own life. Sometimes sacrifice isn't loud. It's made of small choices, repeated until you realize there's nothing left for yourself. I used to believe that if I gave enough, others would understand, but I was wrong. The more you give, the more people believe you don't need to keep anything for yourself. I asked myself, how long has it been since I lived for me? Not for Michael, not for Vanessa, not for the grandchildren I'd adored, But for Evelyn Carter, maybe 40 years, maybe my whole life. I whispered into the silence, I've lived someone else's life and lost my own in the process. The words hung in the air, quiet but sharp. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. And for the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me, not tears, but a spark, a small, fragile spark. Maybe from this moment on, I could start reclaiming the scattered pieces of the life I had lost, even if it meant walking straight into whatever awaited me next. That morning, Charleston was draped in a light rain. I brewed myself a cup of black tea, trying to quiet the headache that came from a sleepless night. The sound of raindrops tapping on the window felt like whispers from the past, persistent, unending. I had planned to spend the day in silence, but a sudden knock on the door made me pause. When I opened it, no one was there, only a yellow envelope lying on the mat, soaked through by the rain. There was no sender, just a shaky blue ink scrawl. Check your account before it's too late. I froze, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. That single line made my heart race. I glanced down the hallway. No one. Everything was too still, the kind of stillness that carries danger in its breath. Who had sent this? And why did they know about my money? I turned on my laptop and logged into my retirement account, the one place that held what little security I had left for the rest of my life. What appeared on the screen made my throat close. $40,000 gone. My cursor hovered over the most recent transaction, a transfer made 2 weeks ago to an unfamiliar account. My pulse quickened as my eyes locked on the recipient's name, Vanessa Carter. I couldn't breathe. My hands went cold as ice. I opened the transaction record again, staring at the digital signature, crooked, uneven, but familiar enough to make my stomach twist. It was forged. And I knew that handwriting anywhere. It was Vanessa's. The realization hit me like a blow to the chest, not from shock, but from betrayal. I had once told her, if you ever need help, just ask me, I'll be there. But she hadn't asked. She had stolen. I called the bank, forcing my voice to stay steady. The employee confirmed the transfer had been authorized through a trusted device registered under my name. When he gave me the IP address, my stomach dropped. It was traced back to Michael and Vanessa's home. My heart began pounding in my ears. Without thinking, I grabbed the phone and dialed Vanessa. She answered almost instantly, her voice light and casual. "Hi, Mom. I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later?" I took a deep breath. "Did you take money from my account?" A brief silence, then a soft exhale. "Mom, that's family money. Why are you being so petty about it?" I blinked in disbelief. "Petty? That's my retirement fund." "Money I saved after 40 years of work. Do you understand that?" Vanessa chuckled lightly, her tone disturbingly calm. "Mom, it's just a temporary loan. Michael's about to invest in a big project. This could change everything for us. Don't you trust your own son?" "You didn't borrow anything. You forged my signature," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Forged? Mom, you're imagining things," she said sweetly, as if humoring a confused child. "You're holding on too tightly to everything. To control to money. You don't realize how much pressure that puts on us. I just want to help you. Let go. Live freely for once." "Help me," I whispered. "You call stealing helping?" Her voice turned cold. "Don't make this bigger than it is. That money belongs to the family. Our family." That word family rang hollow in my ears. The same word I had built my life around, now twisted into an excuse for betrayal. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the eaves, steady and slow. I reopened the yellow envelope, staring at the inked warning before it's too late. A part of me trembled with fear, but another part, the part that had endured too much for too long, began to awaken. This was no longer about money. This was about betrayal. And sometimes, the people who stand closest to you are the ones who push you off the edge. I took a sip of my cold tea. It tasted flat, empty, like the trust that had just been shattered. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered sharp and clear, "If they think I'm weak, they're wrong. This time, I won't cry. I'll find out the truth." The pain had turned into suspicion, and in the quiet of that small apartment, a plan began to take shape. 2 days after receiving the yellow envelope, I still hadn't slept through a single night. My small apartment felt suffocating, as if even the air carried the scent of betrayal. I spent hours staring at my computer screen, scrolling through my bank statements, hoping for some mistake, some innocent explanation. But every trail led back to one person, Vanessa. That afternoon, when the sun slipped behind the old row houses, there was a knock at my door. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. I opened it to find a tall man, maybe 38, wearing a dark raincoat. His face looked familiar, though I couldn't place him. He gave me a small, polite smile. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter," I nodded, keeping one hand on the door. "Who are you?" "Marcus Lee, attorney. I need to speak with you about Vanessa Carter." The sound of her name made my chest tighten. "What do you know about my daughter-in-law?" He looked at me steadily, his eyes calm, but touched with pity. "Not just your daughter-in-law. She's the one trying to take everything you own, and she's done this before." I narrowed my eyes. "Why should I believe you?" Marcus paused, then reached into his coat and pulled out an old photograph. A little boy, maybe 8 years old, face smudged with soot, eyes wide with fear, being carried by a nurse. I looked closer, and my breath caught. It was me. "I'm the boy you carried out of the Grady Hospital fire 20 years ago," he said quietly. "My mother told me I wouldn't be alive if not for you. Now it's my turn to save your name." I sank into the chair stunned. Memories rushed back, the smell of smoke alarms blaring, the heat against my skin as I wrapped my arms around that trembling child. I remembered whispering, "Don't be afraid, sweetheart, I'll get you out." And now that child stood before me in a suit, with the eyes of a man who never forgot. "Marcus," I whispered, "I don't know what to say." He smiled faintly. "You don't have to say anything, Mrs. Carter. Just trust me. I've been watching this case for a while. Vanessa is already moving your remaining assets into her name. If you don't act soon, she'll leave you with nothing." I clasped my hands together. I don't want revenge. I just want peace. His tone shifted, steady and firm. Sometimes justice is the only way to find peace. You've spent your whole life saving others. It's time you saved yourself. His words struck deeper than I expected. Images of that shattered birthday cake, the words, "You should disappear," and Vanessa's empty eyes flashed through my mind. I had believed kindness was enough to protect me, but kindness was no armor against greed. Marcus opened his briefcase and laid a few papers on the table. "I can help you, but I need your agreement on one condition." "What condition?" He looked me straight in the eye. "You have to gather evidence. Every record, emails, bank statements, phone logs. And when I tell you, you'll have to disappear." "Disappear?" I repeated, wary. He nodded. "Pretend to leave their lives. Let them think you're gone. Only then will we see what they do with your money, with your name. That's the only way to expose them." I searched his face, looking for any sign of deceit. There was none, just quiet conviction. Something in his voice made me believe him, perhaps because he spoke not like a lawyer, but like someone who owed a debt of the soul. I walked to the window, watching the street lights shimmer across the rain-soaked pavement. Charleston at night was beautiful and cruel at the same time, like a truth you didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid. "All right," I said softly. "I'll do it. But not for the money, for the truth." Marcus nodded. "You'll need time, and I'll be here when you're ready." He paused at the door, turned slightly, and said, "Don't fear the darkness, Mrs. Carter." Sometimes only in the dark can we see the light. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me in the stillness of my apartment. My hands trembled slightly, but inside something shifted. For the first time in months, I didn't feel just pain, I felt purpose. Somewhere out there in the shadows Marcus spoke of, a flicker of justice had just been lit. Since the day Marcus left, I had been living in a kind of stillness before a storm. Every morning, I still brewed tea, still turned on the jazz radio, but inside my head, all sounds had turned into the rhythm of calculations. I had realized that if I wanted to reclaim my dignity, I couldn't wait for anyone to save me. I had to save myself. Marcus returned 3 days later, carrying a thick folder under his arm. "These are the things you need to do," he said evenly, his eyes sharp. "You have to sign a new will, remove Vanessa's name from any inheritance rights. Then transfer everything that's left to a charity fund I've set up, one that supports elderly women who've been financially exploited. Everything will be legal and no one will know except me." I stared at the papers. Oh, but endings sometimes need to pass through the truth. And truth requires a strike strong enough to be felt. That afternoon, I signed everything. Each stroke of the pen made my chest tighten, as though I was signing pieces of my life away to the past. Removing Vanessa's name wasn't just a legal act, it was a severing. From this moment on, there would be nothing left binding me to her. After it was done, Marcus left, and the air in my apartment was thick with the scent of new paper. I sat alone at my desk and began to write a letter. The page was white, the ink a deep blue, and my handwriting trembled like the heartbeat of someone standing on the edge of a cliff. "You told me I should disappear. I'm only doing what you wished. If one day you realize that greed cannot fill the emptiness inside your heart, remember there was someone who once loved you as her own flesh and blood. Mother." I folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope. It wasn't a farewell, it was an indictment, gentle but sharp as glass. I placed it on the table where Vanessa would see it first. That night, rain fell over Charleston. The city held its breath under a curtain of fog. I packed a few belongings, my wallet, passport, and a small notebook. Every step across the wooden floor echoed like the footsteps of my past. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. Just as I was about to leave, a soft knock sounded at the door. It was Gloria Harris, my elderly neighbor who often brought me apple pie. She looked at me, her wrinkled eyes bright. "Evelyn, I saw Vanessa here yesterday. She was signing a bunch of papers, then left with a man. Do you know anything about that?" I froze. "She came here?" "Yes, and I overheard her say something about signing on someone's behalf, though I'm not sure." My heart pounded. Vanessa had forged my signature again. Marcus needed to know. I called him immediately and told him everything. He listened in silence, then said, "Stay quiet. Tell no one. I'll handle the rest. Gloria is the witness we needed." I understood what that meant. If you want to win against betrayal, you have to let the betrayer believe they've already won. I locked the door, standing in the hallway one last time. The warm light spilling through the curtains cast my shadow long across the wall. This house, once a refuge, had become the shell of a dangerous game I was now willing to play. I slipped the keys into the mailbox, pulled out my phone, and sent Marcus a short text, "Ready." Outside, the rain grew heavier. I pulled my coat tight and walked down the dim street where car lights flickered across puddles like shards of broken glass. With each step away from that home, I felt lighter but colder. I didn't know where this road would lead, only that there was no turning back. When the bus finally left Charleston, I looked out the window and saw the city fading into the distance, its lights dissolving into memory. I whispered, "If death is the only way for me to live, then I'm ready." The words echoed inside me like a vow. This time, I wasn't disappearing because they wanted me gone. I was disappearing to start again and to take back everything they stole, my dignity, my justice, and the life they thought they'd read. The news came faster than I expected. Just 2 days after I left Charleston, my face was everywhere on local television. The anchorwoman's voice was steady and cold. Charleston police are investigating the disappearance of a 67-year-old woman believed to have jumped from the Ravenel Bridge late Thursday night. The car of Mrs. Evelyn Carter was found near the bridge, the door open with her purse and phone still inside. No body has been recovered. I sat motionless on the wooden chair in my small rented apartment in New Orleans, a cup of coffee growing cold on the table. It was a strange, haunting feeling to hear of your own death while your heart still beats, your lungs still draw breath. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I simply watched my old photo flash across the screen, a smiling nurse from 10 years ago, no one knowing that behind that gentle face was a woman who had chosen to vanish. The report continued, the woman's voice detached, almost rehearsed. According to family members, Mrs. Carter had shown signs of depression following a family dispute. Her daughter-in-law, Mrs. Vanessa Carter, tearfully described her as a wonderful mother-in-law and said she is devastated. I laughed bitterly. "A wonderful mother-in-law," I whispered. "She's quite the actress." On screen, Vanessa appeared light makeup, red-rimmed eyes, her voice trembling just enough to earn sympathy. Every word rolled off her tongue like a script. She was like a real mother to me. I wish I could have told her one last time that I never wanted to hurt her. We just didn't understand each other. The host nodded solemnly while I, miles away, laughed alone in that damp little room. She was crying, yet on her hand gleamed the same gold ring I had given her years ago. The studio lights caught it perfectly sharp and blinding. Marcus called soon after the broadcast. "I assume you've seen it," he said. "I just watched my own death on TV," I replied. "It's a strange feeling." His tone was calm but deliberate. "This news will spread quickly. They'll believe you took your own life out of guilt. Vanessa will seize this chance to legalize the asset transfer, but that's our window to track her without suspicion." I kept my eyes on the screen. Vanessa was now holding my grandson, dabbing her eyes, speaking softly to the reporters. Behind her was the house I'd helped them buy, now draped in black ribbons and surrounded by flowers. "She's not just killing me in people's minds, Marcus," I said quietly. "She's burying me with her lies." He replied, "Let her believe you're gone. The deeper that belief runs, the easier it'll be to expose her." A week passed. No body was found. The story shifted from mysterious disappearance to probable suicide. Reporters interviewed my old coworkers, my neighbors. Every voice sounded the same. Evelyn was a kind woman. Maybe she was just tired. I realized that in society's eyes, an old widowed woman who lived quietly could disappear without anyone asking too many questions. It was terrifying, and strangely, it was the greatest advantage I had. Then, one Saturday evening, I sat in the dim light watching the latest update. A memorial service was held today for Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the anchor read. Her daughter-in-law, Mrs. Vanessa Carter, addressed the media, vowing to honor her mother-in-law's wishes and continue her legacy. A low, dry laugh escaped my throat. "She moves fast," I murmured. Barely a week dead, and she's already executing my final wishes. On screen, Vanessa stood before a sea of cameras, the flashlights illuminating her face. She always said everything she had belonged to the family, she told the reporters, and I'll make sure that remains true. I looked straight into those eyes through the screen, the same calculating eyes I once mistook for love. Softly I said, "You told me to disappear, so I did just as you wished." Marcus texted moments later, "We're ready for phase 2. No more direct contact. Everything's going according to plan." I closed the phone and set it aside. Outside New Orleans pulsed with life, jazz echoing from distant bars. But inside me, there was a silence unlike any other, the kind of silence that only comes to someone who has died to the world, but still lives to witness the truth. I took a slow sip of my cold coffee, the screen fading to black. Vanessa's image dissolved into darkness. A week ago, I was a forgotten woman. Tonight, I am a dead one who's still alive, and there is nothing more powerful than a soul that no longer fears loss. I lived under a new name, Eve Morgan, like a mask hastily chosen but necessary. New Orleans gave me cover, the cobblestone streets, the smell of coffee, the distant echo of saxophones. Everything hid me from the eyes of anyone who might still remember Evelyn Carter. I rented a small upstairs room, packed only a few simple clothes and an old photo album, and practiced calling myself by a name that wasn't mine. Every time someone asked, I'd say Eve, softly, without hesitation. It was an exercise in pretending to live, but deep down, my real life, my plan, had only just begun. Marcus kept in touch. He called from a secure number, his voice always steady, calm. "We need to watch Vanessa closely," he said. "The question is, what will she do now that she thinks you're gone?" I smiled faintly, even though he couldn't see it. "Let her feel safe," I replied, "because the higher she climbs, the harder she'll fall." He reminded me to stay silent, to avoid anyone from Charleston, and not to make a single misstep that could reveal I was still alive. A week later, Marcus sent me documents, bank statements, debt contracts, and shopping invoices. Buried within them was one transaction that made my blood run cold, a large loan taken out under the name Evelyn Carter. I stared at the bold letters printed across the page, half in disbelief, half in fury. Marcus texted me, "She's impersonating you, using your name to get more money. Ironic, isn't it?" I laughed quietly, the sound brittle, sharp as glass. Vanessa had used my name, the one she'd buried, to feed her greed. The same name she wanted erased now became her disguise. Marcus was right. The faster she moved, the more mistakes she'd make. He had assembled a small team, a forensic accountant, a private investigator, and a legal analyst, all ready to build a case strong enough to crush her facade. My role was to remember everything, every check I'd written, every gift I'd given, every promise that had been broken. I wrote them down one by one, like a witness documenting her own past. Marcus turned those memories into evidence, financial records, transaction histories, photos. I sent him everything. I had receipts from the house down payment, copies of letters, even the wedding photo where I stood behind them smiling like a shadow. One evening, Marcus met me at a small tea house where the lights were soft and the chatter of strangers gave us safety. He slid a thick envelope across the table. "This is it," he said quietly. "Enough to bring Vanessa to court if you choose." I opened it. Inside were copies of her forged signatures, fake contracts, and Gloria's written statement confirming she saw Vanessa at my house that day. "Gloria has agreed to testify," Marcus added. "She'll say she saw Vanessa signing papers that weren't hers." Relief washed over me, but it was laced with dread. This wasn't over yet. Marcus explained the next step, he'd release small pieces of information, just enough for Vanessa to believe she had everything under control. The moment she moved to finalize her theft, they'd strike. I imagined Vanessa sitting in some expensive chair sipping wine, believing she'd fooled the world, never realizing the trap was closing in. For the first time, I felt something close to satisfaction. Sometimes I wondered if I was becoming the person Vanessa accused me of being, cold, calculating. I told Marcus once, I don't want revenge, I just want peace. He looked at me, calm but firm. Sometimes justice is the only way to peace. That night, I sat by the window, looking out at the city lights shimmering over the river, whispering to myself, let her see that even the dead can demand justice. The words echoed softly in the dark, half a vow, half a confession. I was no longer the forgotten woman they buried in a lie. I was a witness to my own resurrection, and soon the truth would wake the world. That morning, the air in the courtroom felt thick, almost suffocating. I stood behind the heavy wooden doors, my hands trembling, even though I tried to steady them. Marcus stood beside me, his voice calm and low. "Are you ready?" he asked. I nodded, though my heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Today," I whispered, "the dead will walk in to claim justice." Inside, the hearing had already begun. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table dressed in a cream-colored suit, hair perfectly curled, her face composed in that polished way only the truly deceitful could manage. She smiled faintly, confident, almost triumphant. Her attorney spoke smoothly. "My client, Miss Vanessa Carter, is the rightful heir to the late Mrs. Evelyn Carter. The deceased treated her like a daughter, and all existing documents confirm her as the beneficiary." The judge's gavel struck once, the sound echoing like a drumbeat. "Before we issue a final ruling," he said, "the court will hear from the legal representative of the charitable foundation mentioned in Mrs. Carter's will. Please bring them in." Marcus looked at me, gave a small nod. I took a deep breath and pushed open the doors. The hinges creaked as light flooded in, slicing through the stale stillness of the courtroom. Every head turned. Gasps broke out across the room. Vanessa froze. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, but no sound came. Her face went pale, drained of color. She was staring at a ghost. And in a way, she was right. I walked slowly down the aisle, each step deliberate, the sound of my heels steady against the tile floor. It was like walking through time, through every betrayal, toward the moment truth would finally speak. Vanessa suddenly stood up, her voice shaking. "Mom, you're not dead." I stopped in front of her, looked straight into her eyes, and said quietly but firmly, "You told me to disappear, and I did, but I came back to show you what losing someone truly means." The room went silent. You could have heard a pen drop. I opened the leather folder in my hands and laid out the documents one by one. The new will, the bank statements, the notarized affidavits, and Gloria's signed testimony. Marcus stepped forward, his voice cold and steady. "All of this," he said, "proves a deliberate act of fraud. Forged signatures, illegal withdrawals, and attempts to seize property by falsely declaring someone deceased. Miss Vanessa Carter has deceived both this court and the woman who gave her everything." The judge leaned forward, his eyes fixed on me. "Mrs. Carter," he said slowly, "you're confirming that you are alive and that these assets still belong to you." I held his gaze. "I never left life, Your Honor, only the people who made it unbearable. And yes, everything I built, I will decide where it goes, not the one who tried to bury me for it." Vanessa collapsed back into her chair, hands gripping her head. Her lawyer fumbled for words, but none came. The air was heavy, pulsing with tension, until the judge raised his gavel once more and struck it firmly 3 times. "The court finds in favor of Mrs. Evelyn Carter," he declared. "All assets, including the estate and financial accounts, are to be returned to her. Miss Vanessa Carter is found guilty of fraud and unlawful appropriation. She will be prosecuted accordingly." The sound of the gavel was like the closing note of a long, painful symphony. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Marcus watching me, pride and relief mingling in his expression. "Now," he said softly, "you're truly free." Vanessa was escorted out by 2 officers, her silver bracelet glinting under the harsh courtroom light. She turned back once her eyes filled with something that wasn't hatred anymore, just loss. I didn't feel joy or vengeance, only stillness, the quiet that comes after a storm too long endured. Outside, the Charleston sky was clear and blindingly blue. Sunlight fell on my face, warm and real. Marcus joined me on the courthouse steps. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I smiled faintly, glancing toward the doors where Vanessa had disappeared. "No," I said. "I only regret not disappearing sooner. Justice never comes quickly. It crawls, it wounds, but when it arrives, it burns away every lie. And that day, I, the woman the world thought was dead, walked out of that courthouse reborn." Months after the trial, Charleston had returned to its quiet rhythm. The waves still rolled against the shore, the birds still perched on the old rooftops. But for me, everything had changed. I now lived in a smaller apartment, simple, uncluttered, and every morning when I opened the window, I took a deep breath and felt alive. No more sleepless nights startled by guilt, no more phone calls that made my heart pound. Just the calm breath of freedom, something I hadn't truly felt in 40 years. I thought my story had ended there until one morning I received a small envelope. The handwriting was round and uneven, the kind only a child could have. No sender's name, just a line on the front to Grandma Evelyn. I opened it carefully. Inside was a folded piece of paper that still smelled faintly of ink. I recognized the handwriting, small, careful, and heartbreakingly sincere. "Grandma, it's me, Lily." "Mommy was wrong. I promise I'll never be like her when I grow up. I miss you. Mommy won't let me look at your pictures, but I still keep the old one in my room. I hope one day you'll visit me, or at least write back so I know you're okay. I love you, Grandma." I sat there for a long time. My hands trembled slightly as I read and reread each line. Every word from Lily felt like a tiny needle stitching through my heart. Not pain, but tenderness. The little 8-year-old girl, the child of Vanessa and Michael, still remembered me. Despite everything her mother had done to erase me, I still lived somewhere inside that small, pure heart. I folded the letter and looked out the window. The Charleston sky that day was bright and clear sunlight, spilling over the lavender garden I had planted. The air smelled fresh, sweet, and forgiving, as if whispering that it was time to let go. Marcus came by later that afternoon. He looked the same as ever, calm and deliberate, a stack of papers tucked under his arm. "How are you?" he asked. I smiled and handed him the letter. "Read this," I said. "It's the most important thing I've ever received." He read it slowly, carefully, then looked up, his eyes softening. "What will you do?" "I'm not sure," I said, "but maybe it's time to stop fighting. I've already won, not in court, but inside myself." He nodded quietly. "Forgiveness isn't to set them free," he said. "It's to set yourself free." I looked at him and smiled faintly. Exactly. I don't need Vanessa to repent. I just need Lily to grow up without inheriting her mother's bitterness. That night, after Marcus left, I sat by my small desk and began writing a letter back. "My dear Lily, I was so happy to get your letter. I am well and I miss you very much. You don't have to carry the mistakes of grown-ups, my dear. Children are not born to bear the weight of their parents' wrongs. Grow up kind and learn to forgive. It's the greatest gift one can ever give. I won't come back, not because I'm angry, but because I want you to have peace. One day when you're old enough, you'll understand that sometimes leaving is also a way to love. With all my heart, Grandma Evelyn. I folded the letter and placed it in an envelope, but I didn't mail it. Maybe Lily didn't need to read it yet. Maybe it was enough for me to have written it enough to know that I had chosen forgiveness. That night, I stood on my balcony looking out at the river where the streetlights shimmered like fireflies. The sound of the crickets mixed with the soft lapping of waves. I whispered to myself, "You've come full circle, Evelyn. You're home now." A gentle wind brushed past me, carrying the faint scent of lavender and something warmer, perhaps memory itself. Tears slid down my cheek, but they weren't bitter anymore. They were soft, light, and free. Maybe that's what justice truly leaves behind. Not triumph, not vengeance, but peace. The quiet peace of a heart that has finally learned to let go. A year after the trial, I left America. No one knew except Marcus. He came to the Charleston airport to see me off and said just one sentence. "You deserve the peace you've earned through your pain." I didn't answer. I only smiled. I had spent my whole life protecting others from suffering. Now I was finally protecting myself. I left without explanations, without apologies, and without the need for anyone to understand. I chose Lisbon, a city bathed in Atlantic light, where the sun glows like honey and the wind tastes of salt. There, no one knew who Evelyn Carter was. No one whispered about the woman who came back from the dead. I rented a small room on the hill of Alfama, where every morning the sound of a guitar floated through the cobbled streets, and people called out to one another in a language I couldn't yet fully understand, but whose warmth told me I belonged. Sometimes in the evenings, I'd walk down to the edge of the Tagus River and watch the sun melt into gold over the horizon. The waves brushed against the sand, gently whispering secrets only those who had lost everything could understand. And in my heart, I heard my own voice, steady and calm. Sometimes you have to die in someone else's heart to be reborn in your own. I remembered writing that sentence in the small notebook I carried from America. Back then, I wasn't sure I believed it. But with each passing day in Lisbon, with every simple encounter, the fishmonger smiling, the young boy strumming his guitar, the woman selling oranges, I began to see that life didn't need grandeur to be meaningful. It only needed grace. In the mornings, I went to the market, buying fish, bread, and a few fresh oranges. The vendors called me Donna Eve, Mrs. Eve, the name I had once invented to hide behind, now the name of the person I had become. I was no longer Evelyn Carter the mother, the widow, the betrayed. I was simply Eve, a woman who had learned to stand up from the ashes of her own ruin. One late afternoon under the soft Lisbon sunset, Marcus called. He told me he had quit his law firm and taken a position as a legal advisor for a nonprofit organization, a foundation supporting elderly women who had been financially exploited. I laughed. "You found your purpose then." He replied, "I just followed the person who taught me that justice doesn't need vengeance to exist." I didn't say anything, but my chest tightened with quiet pride. Perhaps we all must lose everything once to know what truly matters. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Family is not where blood ties exist, but where people treat each other with respect." I used to think losing family was the greatest tragedy. But now I understand family isn't the shared meals, the empty greetings, or the forced affection. Family is the place where kindness isn't mistaken for weakness, And sometimes, to find that family, you must leave behind the ones who taught you otherwise. One misty morning, I walked barefoot along the Lisbon shore. The sea breeze was cool, the sky pale silver, and the waves rolled like quiet breaths. The first light of dawn stretched across the water, and I whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance to live." I no longer hated Vanessa. She had already paid the price, and perhaps the emptiness inside her would punish her more than any court ever could. I didn't need to see it to know. In an unsent letter, I wrote Vanessa, "I have forgiven you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let my heart grow heavier with hatred. You told me to disappear, and I did, but not in the way you wished. I disappeared to live." I closed the notebook and looked up. The wind carried the scent of salt and the faint chime of church bells from afar. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze play with my hair, and smiled. No one called me mother anymore. No one needed me to carry their burdens. But for the first time in years, I felt enough. At 68, I was starting over. I had no wealth, no reputation, no family, but I had freedom. I lived slowly, wrote small reflections in my journal, cooked simple meals, read until my eyes grew tired. Each night, I lit a single candle on the table. Its light reminded me that no matter how long the darkness lingers, there is always something, someone that finds its way back to the light. Because now I know, greed may rot the roots of kinship, but justice and dignity will always find their way home. I walked along the sand, the wind lifting my gray hair, my footsteps fading softly behind me. The Lisbon sea shimmered alive and vast, and I whispered with a smile, "People only truly disappear when they stop believing in themselves." And for the first time in my life, I believed. I had never really disappeared. I had only just begun to live.